I think that many of the people listening are very good at advocating for each other or the teams that they lead or their children or their spouses and aren't so good at advocating for themselves. And my hope is that you walk away from this episode with some tools to do that.
Oh my gosh, we all need to be a better advocate for ourselves. Hi, friends. Welcome to Productive Joy. We're in for a treat today, as always, and I am so excited to introduce you to my friend Heather. But before we do, if you're not following, now's the time. I know we all need a little more productive joy in our life, and this is a great free shot of B12, so go for it. Today, we have with us Heather Hansen, and Heather is lots of amazing things. She's a podcaster, she's an author, she's a TEDx speaker, which we'll talk about for sure. She's also a voracious reader to the tune of about 200 books a year. She reads fiction at night and nonfiction during the day, so she loves both. She's also a dog mom to a COVID dog named Wolf, but they call him Wolfie because he's little. He, she, we didn't talk about that. Is it a she or she?
It's a he.
It is a he. Okay, and she loves to walk to the tune of about 9 miles yesterday. So today she gets to be a guest on Productive Joy. Welcome, Heather.
I am so happy to be here, Christy.
This is going to be fun. And it was really fun for me to kind of cyberstalk you a little bit and learn a little bit about who you are. Everything that we do aligns quite nicely. But what would you say to people in like 30 seconds or less that would get them super excited about this episode?
I think that many of the people listening are very good at advocating for each other or the teams that they lead or their children or their spouses and aren't so good at advocating for themselves. And my hope is that you walk away from this episode with some tools to do that.
My gosh, we all need to be a better advocate for ourselves, don't we? Why do you think that is? Why do you think that we don't do a good job of advocating for ourselves?
I think that especially women, but sometimes with men as well, we think it's bragging. There's this like fine line between speaking up for yourself and feeling as though you are self-aggrandizing or asking for too much. We think that the golden rule should always work. If we give a certain thing, we expect people to give it in return. We're assuming that other people see the world the way that we do. And so all of those things come together to make us think that we shouldn't speak up for ourselves and that we shouldn't have to.
And you've written a book to convince people to speak up for themselves, haven't you? I love the title. So why don't you tell everybody what the title is, and then we'll go from there.
So the title is The Elegant Warrior: How to Win Life's Trials Without Losing Yourself.
It's got to have been inspired by something. So what happened in your world that got you to the point where you're like, yeah, I've got to write this book?
So I was a trial attorney for over 20 years. I defended doctors in medical malpractice cases.
Ooh.
And I really worked to ride that line between elegance and compassion and being a warrior. And one day it all sort of came to a head. I had taken the deposition of a patient who was suing a doctor. Those were my cases were all about. And during the deposition, the patient was really uncomfortable and kept having to go to the bathroom and getting teary about the pain. And we couldn't continue the deposition. So we had to come back a different day. And the same thing was happening the next time we did it. And so I asked him, what can I do to help you? And he said, my boots are making me hot and sweaty. And he had on those great big Timberland boots with the thick laces. So I got down on my hands and knees and I untied his boots and he pushed and I pulled and I took his boots off and we were able to do the deposition and it was great. Then a year or so later, we come to trial. And the day of the trial, I was getting ready to cross-examine him. And I knew, Christy, from looking at the medical records and the depositions of the nurses, that he wasn't telling the truth. And we lawyers, we call the rooms where we prepare for trial war rooms. We call the stories we tell about our cases, the war stories. And so I do have to be a warrior in the courtroom.
Yeah.
So I was getting ready to do that. And he came over to me right before he was taking the stand with his mother. And he said, Mom, this is that nice lady I told you about, the one who helped me with my shoes that day. And she hugged me. And then he went up and took the stand.
Oh, gosh.
And so I had to cross-examine him, right? That was my job on behalf of my client. It's also a service to the jury so that they could see the facts and decide what was true. But there was a part of me that felt terrible. And when I went to my car, I knew I had done a great job, but I was crying because I was wondering, who am I? Am I this elegant, compassionate woman who gets on her knees to help someone who's hurting? Or am I the warrior in the courtroom? And I think we all have those moments where we think to ourselves, do I want to fight? Do I want to be soft or hard?
Yeah.
Do I want to push or do I want to receive? And where is that line? And I think that walking that line is a goal that we all share.
Yeah. It's an art, isn't it? It's an art to know how to balance it's not just as women, but I can only speak as a woman because I am one. For me, it's often that, okay, so I'm supposed to show up authentically as who I am, but will I fit in this space? Will I be accepted for being all of this? Because I'm a lot. Glitter through and through. And yet, when I don't, that's when I am my most uncomfortable, when I feel like I'm wearing a mask, when I struggle to just even be. And so you're helping people find that middle, right?
That's the hope, is to help them do it themselves.
Mhm.
Because we know, it reminds me of the Michelangelo when he was carving David. It was just a big block of marble that he was given. And a lot of people said that he couldn't make anything out of it. And then he did. And someone asked him how he did it. And he said, I just cut the stone until the angel appeared. And it's sort of that for many people that I work with and that read the book, we talk about the fact that it's really not a building or a creating, it's a cutting away
Mm,
of all of the sort of masks that we wear so that we come down to the truth of who we are and who we want to be.
mm. Okay, so you started out as a trial lawyer, so went through law school. Was that what you wanted to be since a little girl? Like, did you know that's where you were supposed to be?
I wanted to be Oprah, so I wanted to be in
Kind of
front
love
of
that.
you. Who didn't? There's a lot of people out there who wanted to be Oprah, I think. But I started undergrad majoring in something at my school. It was called CLEG. It was Communications Law, Economics, and Government. And I started to do a lot of journalism classes. And then I took a psychology class and I got really into psychology. So I graduated with a psychology major and decided to go to law school because it felt like the safest way to be able to sort of scratch the like acting itch, the being in front of an audience itch
Oh,
that
I
I had.
get that. Yeah.
And also to be of service with the fact that I read so much and I read quickly. I knew that that would be, helpful in law school and as a lawyer. And I knew that I wanted to be a trial lawyer. I didn't go to law school to like see what I'd try and decide later or do like tax or real estate. I knew I wanted to be a trial attorney from the time that I stepped foot in law school.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. So, did you have entertainment in your background? Like, was there, and I ask because I'm the daughter of an entertainer. My father had the longest running comedy show in Vegas in the 70s and
Oh
80s.
my gosh,
And
I did
yes,
not know that.
I
That's
know, kind
so
of fun.
fun.
And so I used to say, because I knew I wanted to be a teacher, period. Thank you very much. That's what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to be an educator. But I would always say, and I think I wrote this in my yearbook, where am I going to be in 10 years? I'm going to be teaching during the school year and entertaining in the summers because I saw those as two separate things. They're not.
No, no, not at
Every good
all.
educator is a great performer. And that's, I think, true also of a lawyer is you have to convince people, and that psychology background has to be super huge. So where did that come from?
I don't really know. I don't come from, my mom was a teacher. My parents were both teachers when they met. My dad then went into sales. My
Okay.
mom retired from teaching, so she taught her whole career. I don't know where that came from. I mean, when I was a kid, I was in school plays and my school did the poetry readings and all of that and I loved all of that. I've heard you on the podcast say before that you like love to have a microphone. I've always loved public speaking as well. Being a lawyer is a type of public speaking that's more challenging than, because it's a win or lose situation, and
Yeah.
so the stakes are very high. But I always loved speaking. That was a very specific thing. I don't sing, I don't dance. Speaking is the thing that I loved, and I actually, while I liked acting, I liked speaking my own words.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, how did you take that into the TEDx space? And I'm asking because that's a cool transition that a lot of people are trying to make right now. And you made it years ago, right?
Yeah, was it before COVID?
I feel like it was 2018 or 2019 that I saw. I don't
It
remember.
might have been later than that. It might have been like 21. Yes, the TEDx process is interesting. You can apply. There's many, many, many of them. It's not the big TED stage. A lot of people listening probably don't know that distinction. But the big TED stage is a bigger deal
Yes.
and it's harder to get. The
Yes.
TEDx stages are smaller and they're all over the United States. And I applied for a number of them because I wanted that particular message, I think is one that I would like to share wide and far.
Well, tell
And
tell our listeners what message that is so that they can go listen.
so it's called Why Perspective is Better Than Empathy. I think that there's been a big discussion about empathy, and I'm an empath, so I get it. And The father of empathy, Daniel Goleman at Harvard, has talked about different types of empathy. There is emotional or affective empathy, which is feeling what others feel, which I think is what we talk about a lot. And I don't think that that version of empathy is all that helpful.
Mm.
The other version, in certain settings anyway, the other version of empathy is seeing what others see. That's cognitive empathy. And that's the kind, it's also perspective taking. And that's the kind that I think is actually valuable in the courtroom, in the operating room, in the doctor's office, in the classroom. Because I mean, look at it, Christy, for you as a teacher. If one of your students comes in and they're having troubles at home and they're angry or they're anxious or they're scared or they're frustrated, if you feel their anger, anxiety, fear, frustration, you're probably not going to be that helpful to
Right.
them. But if you see the world through their eyes and see yourself through their eyes and see the interventions that you're thinking of through their eyes, then you will serve them more effectively. So the TEDx is about why perspective is better than empathy. And I put that in quotes because it's really a specific kind of empathy.
Well, and okay, I've lived that, especially more recently. I would say in the last, let's go with 5 to 10 years, I have been paying more attention to why people do the things that they do, right? And I'm watching my daughter, who is a kindergarten teacher. She's in her third year. She has this by nature, right? She's able to look at a kid and say, okay, I know what's happening at home and I know what's happening in their world. And in this reaction, I know how to help. Sometimes she'll just say, do you just need to be squeezed?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, yes. And she'll hold them real tight. And that's what they needed to reset their nervous system.
Yep.
Or, she had a little boy that his home life was rough and he would act out at school to the point where he would just scream for an hour and a half, just completely lose it. And she got him from that to within maybe 3 or 4 weeks to being able to say, Miss McMullen, I'm feeling frustrated and I need to take a minute. She'd say, yes, absolutely. Do that.
Take a minute. Yeah.
Right. But that's what I think you're saying is that understanding their perspective is more important than you're saying, bless its heart, bless that sweet little baby's heart. You feel all of that,
Of course.
but it doesn't help.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And it's wonderful that it sounds like relatively naturally to your daughter. And to some of us, it does more than others. And some people, the emotional part comes more easily,
Yes.
right? You
Yes.
feel other people's feelings and it really
Yes.
sucks you up. But I remember, speaking of schools, and I may mess up this story because I haven't thought of it in a long time. But I remember one of the things that struck me when I was researching this and thinking about it is they had a school where a lot of the kids weren't coming to school regularly. And somebody went out to see like why these kids are not showing up at school. And someone in the house recognized that they didn't have washers and dryers. And so they weren't coming to school every third day because they didn't have any more clean clothes. And so Whirlpool donated washers and dryers to the
Yep.
school and they would wash the clothes at school. And now all of a sudden the absentee rate went way down.
Sure it did.
You can't figure that out unless you see the world
Yeah.
from the child's perspective,
100%.
right? You can feel badly, you can be sad, you can be angry at the parents for not sending them, but until you actually see what they see, it's hard to make a difference.
Yeah. So Chloe's a psychology major also, and I think that probably gave you the foundation that you needed. I know it gave her the foundation she needed to be able to see past some of that stuff. And I am just so grateful for people like you that recognize and we all have our unique gifts, right? And I think that this is part of your also unique gift. Yes, you've been schooled there and you've learned these things, but then you've turned it into something the rest of us can use. So fun fact, I am going to be on my first TEDx on November 9th. Today's
Oh my
November
gosh,
6th.
so fun.
I
So fun.
I'm very excited about it. And I think what I love about what you just said is now I can go Google it, right? And I want my listeners to do exactly that because when you hear it, the beauty of a TEDx is it's quick, it's
Mhm.
succinct, it's well thought out, and
Yeah.
it's clear. And sometimes we ramble. I mean, not me. I clearly never ramble, but it's that succinctness that I appreciate. And,
Yeah.
as a trial lawyer, I'm going to guess you had to learn that talent real quick and in a hurry.
So quick. And in fact, I probably erred on the side of too quick.
Mm.
I think that I see some trial attorneys, especially on the other side, who are very slow and deliberate. I was always, and this goes back to that perspective taking, I was so aware that I was like, the jury is like I want to get out of here. I want to get back to my family, that I was trying to see it from their perspective and trying to get through. But I will say I've also done some television stuff. I am a legal analyst for various TV stations. And that ability to be succinct is huge on television because you get all of 2 minutes to explain your point. So
Yeah.
it does come in handy. And brevity, especially these days with the short attention spans, is very, very helpful.
Yeah, well, you do have that gift for sure. It's been honed and I love it. And everybody doesn't have it because you have to also be interesting in that short amount of time. Because
Yeah.
otherwise it's
Right.
just like, what did she say?
Right. Right. And why do I care?
Yeah, and why is she still talking? So that does not happen with you. But I love the title of your book. And so I'd like to dig into that a little bit. And then we're going to shift gears into some productive joy. So tell us how you landed on it. Well, first tell us the title, but then tell us how you landed on that title.
So, The Elegant Warrior, and then How to Win Life's Trials Without Losing Yourself. The Elegant Warrior is really the part, right? That is the thing. And it was partly that idea of like, I'm a warrior in the courtroom. That is my job, to be a warrior. And yet there's this sense of elegance. My grandmother, I spent summers with her as a child, and she did not like me to leave the house without lipstick and earrings.
Oh,
She was very elegant. She did not, women did not drink beer. We did not drink out of cans, very, just very elegant. But also, I'm very, very into words. The reader in me just loves them. And I always want to know the etymology, the root of the word. Where does it come from? What does it mean? Because I think words are magical and I
mhm.
need to know the source of that magic. And the root of the word elegant is to choose. It's the same root as the word elect. And
Okay.
so for me, it was very much the idea that not everyone is like my grandmother. Not everyone, and including myself, wants to wear lipstick and earrings every time they go to the gym. But it's choosing what elegance means to you and then being true to that choice, even when you are at war.
Yeah.
There's certain things that I would not do, because the courtroom is a winner and a loser and it's public. It can be very aggressive.
Yeah.
It's similar to politics and sports. And so there are certain things that other lawyers did that I would not do. I was very aware of what are the lines I will not cross?
Mm.
What am I willing to do and not willing to do to get a win? How am I willing to treat people? And it was very important to me to be consistent with that. Remain so.
Good for you. Good for you. I did not know that elegant meant choice, but now that you're saying that, I think that elegance is a choice. I also think that joy is a choice. And now that you are getting ready to tell us your definition, I am so excited, especially since I know you love words. If you had to describe productive joy, how would you describe it?
It's so funny because I know that you asked this question. And before we started, I walked Wolf, and it's a gorgeous day here in Jersey City. And the Jersey City is on the water, it's on the Hudson. The water is sparkling where we walk on the boardwalk. And there was a boat going by, and the name of the boat was Joy. And I was thinking about how we're going to be talking about productive joy. And I think that I'm also I spend a lot of my time thinking about and researching beliefs.
Mm.
And I think that if you believe that something productive can also be joyful, it can. And if you believe that something joyful can also be productive, it can. And if you don't, it won't, because your beliefs create your reality. So I was walking the dog and not really thinking about it at all. And then when I saw that boat, I was like, oh, this walk is so productive. And it's definitely joyful because it's such a gorgeous day and the water's sparkly and I have that, but it's so productive because I'm moving my body and I'm talking to the dog and I'm seeing people I know on the walk and this gorgeous scene. And so choosing to believe that it was a productive walk made it a productive walk, and the joy came easy. And then there's other times where you're doing something productive and you've got to also choose that it can be joyful, and then the joy can come easily. So a lot of our beliefs are choices. And when we know that, we can choose the belief that gets us the result we want.
Yeah. A phrase I use often is that beliefs drive behaviors. And that's essentially what you just said, right? It creates a reality. And I appreciate the juxtaposition of being productive can be joyful and being joyful can be productive. I have found that when we work with organizations, there are places where that is indeed true. And there are other places where they think they are absolutely mutually exclusive, right? Like you cannot have fun at work. Why would you have fun at work? And I am of the belief that if you're not having fun at work, people will quit on you, quiet quit or otherwise. That's going
Yeah.
to happen.
Yeah.
So, doing something like being a trial lawyer or working in that space, how did you help create joy in a space that could have been perceived as a little rough, like winners, losers, there's black and white, and that's it.
Yeah, it's to be honest with you, it was a very difficult thing, especially at the beginning, because my cases were often catastrophic injuries.
Ooh.
So brain damaged babies, paralyzed grown-ups. Like they were very sad cases. And at the beginning, to be honest, Christy, I didn't think that there was room for joy in the courtroom.
Yeah.
Outside of the courtroom, maybe. But when I walked into the courtroom, I wanted to, especially on the defense side of those cases, I wanted to honor the other side. And I thought that part of that was not showing any sort of joy or laughing even in the courtroom. I found over time that the two can coexist. And so in the courtroom, there would be moments of levity, and I allowed myself to laugh. And I saw that the jury wanted those moments of levity. And so that was probably where it was the hardest. Outside of the courtroom, I think lawyers need to find that joy, or else they find it in a sandwich or at the bottom of a bottle.
Yeah.
And it's far better, lawyers tend to have higher rates of suicide and higher rates of alcoholism because it can be a very joyless activity.
Mm.
But I definitely worked with my mentees and my mentors and found lots of things to laugh about in our cases and in our preparation for the cases, especially because like one of my mentors had been a DEA agent before he became a lawyer. And so he would just not, he was like, we were on a sting. He would not sleep at night. So you get slap happy at 3 o'clock in the morning
Yeah.
preparing. So you've got to allow the joy, I think, sometimes.
Mhm. So, yes. And I think that many people struggle in that space, right? Where they think, okay, well, if I laugh, they won't take me seriously. Or if I act silly, or if so we're planning for an all staff retreat and we are using a duck theme. And everybody's going to get a little rubber duck. And one of the things that they suggest, because we're trying to come up with, okay, how will we move our bodies? How will we do this? How will we do that? And somebody said, what if we had them stand up and hold their duck and then flap their wings like if they went into this whole thing? And I thought, oh, okay, okay. Uh, and yet I would love it. And I'm thinking about my introverted friends who would look at that and go, under no circumstance
Right.
am I going to flap my wings. I am a grown human. Don't ask me to do that. And so I think, too, something that you just brought up in my brain is that it's also nuanced. And we have to be thoughtful about how other people not just perceive us, but how we allow them to show up authentically as well. Did you find that to be true? Do you still find that to be true?
100%. And I think that it's harder, you're going back to that idea of perspective taking, right? From your perspective, it sounds fun,
Yeah.
but you had the wherewithal to see the perspective of the introverts and to think, they may not. And it's harder. I often talk about knowing your jury, and I put the jury in quotes because your jury is anyone you want to persuade or influence. And it's harder when you have a jury of multiple people.
Yeah.
This offsite, you're going to have multiple people. Some are introverts, some are extroverts. Some will happily flap, some will not so happily flap. So you've got to try to find something that is sort of a happy medium or that fits the bill for a group of people. Whereas if it was a small group of people and you knew they were all extroverts or introverts, easy. I think that when your jury is a committee or a
Mm.
group of people, you've got to take the perspective of the wide variety of people
Yeah.
and then try to find a solution that will speak to all of them. And it's a real challenge. I mean, that's the hardest part of being a trial attorney is
Yeah.
you've got 12 people. My cases were 12 jurors plus 2 alternates that you have to persuade, and they influence each other and they're very different. So I think that the idea of, trying to find that productive joy and that silliness is you've got to be careful
Yeah.
that you're not turning off some jury members because you're not seeing their perspective.
Right. And you're not being serious enough, or you're not being. And I think what I have found for me, because I am wide the heck open, I give scratch and sniff stickers to adults and, all the things, is I've had to learn to call it what it is publicly, right? And say, I'm coming at it from this place. And I know that that will not please all of you. And if you need to sneak off to the bathroom right now, that is okay. No one will know, right? And I bet in a jury type situation, that's even more difficult because all you really know about that jury is what they chose to tell you in your 2 or 3 questions that you got to ask to select them, right? And then the expressions on their faces. And that's kind of it.
Yes. Yes. And in some jurisdictions, now I'm a trial consultant as one of my jobs. And in some jurisdictions, they can give you notes, which are very helpful because, I often say this in our lives outside the courtroom, we can turn to our juries and say, what are you thinking? What do you like? What am I missing? Is one of my favorite questions. But in the courtroom, I don't get to turn to the jury and say, what are you thinking? What am I missing? And so it's very challenging. And so I think a lot of attorneys in that respect play it safe. But I will say, one of the things that you just said, Christy, when you said, you call it out, that is a huge, huge credibility builder.
Mm.
When you own something, if you say to, like you just said, when you say to the group, I know this might be weird to some of you or might be over the top to some of you, it's owning something that may be seen as a little bit negative about you. And when you do that, when you take responsibility, when you own making a mistake or doing something differently or not totally meeting their expectations, your credibility goes through the roof.
Yeah.
And credibility really, in my estimation, is everything. Because in the courtroom, they could think I'm funny, nice, prepared, smart, well read, well spoken. But if they don't believe me, I can't win.
Right.
And so I cannot afford to lose credibility. And at every opportunity, I want to build it. And one way that I do it is exactly what you just said. I call it owning it, but you said calling it out. Same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Well, and I have a feeling that you have been very successful in that space because it translates into everything else you could possibly do. I mean, we are all basically facing a jury of our peers on the daily.
Absolutely. I say that all the time. And sometimes people are like, wait, what? But it's absolutely the case.
100%. And sometimes we pick them, right? Like sometimes we choose to surround ourselves, but there are many, many instances where we don't have a whole lot of choice in that.
100% as well. And then the same was true in the courtroom. I mean, it depends on the way that jury selection is run, but you're really trying to just get out the worst and then
Yeah.
you take what you've got left. But I do think that the more that we can know our juries and understand them, you have to understand before you will be understood.
Yeah.
And so it's really doing that work and then you can really start to play.
Yeah. Okay. So 20 years as a trial lawyer, I'm going to guess you had an unbelievably ridiculous get out of jury duty story. So, what is your most ridiculous thing that somebody ever said to get out of jury duty?
Well, I mean, so many things, but
Right.
I practiced in Philadelphia, and so they were not super strict about it. They would say, "Does anyone have any hardships?" Hardships are supposed to be like, you don't make money if you don't
Yeah.
serve,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
sort of thing. But in Philadelphia, they tended to let a lot of people out for almost anything. But what I do think and is worth sharing, and I think it's funny, is I represented doctors, and one of the things that I talk about a lot is that on my juries I always had 12 patients.
Mm,
Everybody in the jury was a patient. But
mm.
I've never, in 20 decades of doing this work, I never had a doctor on one of my juries. And
Really?
so, yeah, because the other side would strike them and
Ah,
say they can't be fair.
ah,
And so, because they're doctors, but meanwhile, everybody's a patient, but I can't strike every patient because then we'd have no jury. And so it was hard because it means that they see the world from a jury's perspective. And my job is to show them a doctor's perspective and turn their perspective around.
mm.
So I had a doctor one time who was complaining about that. And he said, this isn't a jury of my peers. And I said, well, maybe not, but this is the way it goes, whatever. I'd say a year or so later, that doctor called me up and he had jury duty and he wanted to get off. And I was like, doctor, how do you expect to get a jury of your peers when and it's true, right? When people call me and say, I want to get out of jury duty, I know this isn't an answer to your question,
No,
but
but I
it's
like
worth
this answer.
sharing. It is part of our duty as citizens. So there's that piece. But also, if you want a jury of your peers, God forbid you're ever in that situation, the only way you get that is if you serve, without him being willing, and he would be stricken from a medical malpractice case,
Sure.
but he might be on an engineering case or a
Sure.
product liability case. And so it's sort of that, hypocrisy. And he's a great guy, very good. I stay friends with the doctors that I represent, and he was just busy and wanted to do surgery. He
You're
thought
like,
like I
I
want
just
to
want to
work.
save lives.
Yes, exactly, exactly. But he didn't try to get out of it, and he got struck anyway. So everybody won. But I do think that there's lots of imaginative ways that people try to get out of jury duty. And I think they're missing out because I am always stricken because of my background.
Sure.
But it's also the people that I talk to afterwards. Sometimes the judges want you to talk to the jury, and sometimes the jurors want to talk to you. And they love it. They feel like they've really done a service. They've learned a lot. They sort of become friends with each other if it's long enough trial. So
That's
it's
cool.
it's worth doing.
I've only ever served once, and I was the whatever you call the head
The
juror.
foreman,
Yeah,
forewoman.
that's it.
Yes, yes.
And it was a fascinating process, absolutely. One that I did enjoy. I did feel like I was giving back. And my daughter has been called, but not ever selected. And that was her whole thing was, I really want to be picked. Like, I want to
Yes,
see this.
yes,
So
yes.
that's very, very cool. Well, Heather, you are first of all fascinating, and secondly, such a wealth of knowledge. And I'm so grateful that you decided that our Productive Joy listeners needed to learn a little bit more about who you are.
I am delighted to have been here. We're gonna do a swap, Christy. You're gonna come on my podcast, The Elegant Warrior. So I'm really looking forward to that as well.
Oh my gosh, I will make sure I wear lipstick and wear earrings. That was a rule in my house too. I understand when you're in entertainment, there are certain
Oh
things that
yes.
have to be a certain way. Thank you very much.
I get it. I get it. Absolutely.
All right, but before we go, I do have some rapid fire questions that I'm really excited to ask because you've heard these
Yes.
before. So, okay, first question. What is your definition of fun?
I think that it is choosing to be in the moment.
Mm.
So work can be fun when you're all in and play, walking the dog, like walking the dog today.
Yeah.
If I had my earphones in and I was listening to a podcast, it would be productive, but it wouldn't always be joyful. But the fact that I was completely present, and sometimes it would be joyful, but I was present, walking the dog, looking at the water, and I caught sight of that boat that I wouldn't have otherwise seen. And that was fun. So I think being in the moment and allowing yourself to choose that is fun.
I appreciate that. I actually had a similar experience. I walked Dexter, the dog, today, and I didn't take my phone and I just, enjoyed what was happening around me. And I don't do that often enough. So
Yeah.
thank you for that reminder. How do you know that you are showing up as your authentic self?
I think so much of that is feeling your emotions. I will say for myself, the lawyer in me, the reader in me, I'm a lot about thoughts and actions, thoughts and actions. And what comes between thoughts and actions are emotions. And I think that when you are grounded enough to feel in your body what feels good and you start to recognize those signals in the emotions, that's when you know whether you're showing up as your authentic self or not.
Mm. So true. So true. How do you channel your best self on your worst days?
I probably don't. I mean, to be perfectly honest,
Yeah.
right? I think that, it's sort of like the book, The Four Agreements. Always do your best is one of the four agreements, but it's your best on a given day.
Mm.
So that's part of it. I think the other thing, my dad recently passed and I've always like dabbled in journaling, but what I've started doing since he passed is a version of morning pages, but it's writing out all of my worst feelings and thoughts for about 20 minutes every morning, like terrible things that you would never say even to a therapist about and some of it's grief, but some of it's anger and some of it's regrets and some of it's resentment. And it's not even just about my dad. It can be about my partner or the dog or whatever. And then I rip it up. So no one will ever see it. No one will ever read it, but it's out of me. And
Yeah.
I think that when I wake up and it's a bad day and I can get all of that out there, and then it's less likely to come out in my interactions.
Yeah. There's power in that. I think I think people say, oh, write all the things you're grateful for. And that is important too. But in this case, the getting rid of, like I used to have students do that before they took a test. I taught high school and this was years ago, but I would have them write down what they were afraid of or what they were concerned about, rip it up, throw it away, and then take the test. And there's a lot of research around how much better kids will do when they've gotten all their fears out.
I love that because I wasn't aware of that research, but I was experiencing like some pain after my dad died. And so I read a book called Mind Your Body, I think it's called. And she talks about journal speak, she calls it. But they talk about sometimes pain is just feelings that you don't express.
Yeah.
Sort of in your body.
Because we hold it, right? Like we
Yeah.
hold it wherever it is. So we got to let that go. Oh.
And I do want to just add this for the listeners, because I think that many of us who are into the personal development that this podcast is about, we think, well, if I think those things, they will become my reality.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not your thoughts, it's your beliefs that become your reality, right? And these thoughts are just there. And to let them out allows them not to become your beliefs.
Yeah.
So it really does serve.
Yeah, most definitely. All right. Before I ask my favorite final question, I just have to recap. You've said some really beautiful things. So this last question is going to be hard. You talked about the importance of advocating for yourself and not just advocating for everybody else. You you gave a whole TEDx on perspective being better than empathy and knowing how to see things from somebody else's perspective. But that last thing that you just said was something I had already circled on my page, and that's that your beliefs create your realities, and recognizing that, do I believe this or did I just think think it, because we don't have to hold on to every thought we have. But what do I believe? What I really hold on to? Lots of great things that you said today, Heather, but you got to pick one because that's what our brains do. Our brains gravitate towards one major idea. So if people can only walk away with one major thing, what do you want them to leave with today?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's this idea. We think that our brilliance, our experience, our passion, our thoughts will speak for themselves.
Mhm.
Like the work should speak for itself. My experience should speak for itself. They don't. They need us to speak for them. And you get better at that with the things that we talked about today. But the first thing that you have to recognize is that you are necessary for your ideas and your experience and your brilliance. And if you don't speak up for it, no one else will.
Mm. You are necessary. I think there are probably one or two or 10 or 500 people who need to hear that right now. So thank you for that reminder that we are necessary and that it isn't enough to just be. We need to also be willing to be that elegant warrior and say, hey, no, actually.
Right. That's right. It's true. Yeah.
Heather, you were such a delight. Thank you so, so much for choosing to be on Productive Joy today. It was perfect.
It was my pleasure, Christy.
So, how would people find you, Heather, if they want to learn more about you or read your book or do anything? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
So my website is beliefbuilders.com. That's the best place to find all the things. And then on Instagram, I'm at an elegant warrior. And so I post a lot on there.
Yeah, you have a big following too. So clearly you're seeing some things that people need to hear. That's wonderful. Well, friends, I told you, in for a treat, and it was absolutely elegant. And I am glad you chose to stay here and to listen to this episode. I hope that it gave you the shot of B12 that it was meant to do. And I hope that you figure out a way today to turn fun into action.